Let's go Dolphins! I don't think many people saw this coming. Because after everything the Miami Dolphins did this offseason, there was one question that kept coming up. Did this franchise really make the right decisions? Some fans believed the rebuild was too aggressive. Others questioned whether Miami had given up too much in order to build for the future. And then, ESPN released its offseason grades. What happened next completely changed the conversation. The Dolphins didn't just receive a good grade. They earned an A-, tying for the second highest offseason grade in the entire NFL. Honestly, that's not something many people expected to see. Think about everything this organization has gone through over the past several months. A completely new direction. A new general manager. A new head coach. Major roster changes. Difficult financial decisions. And instead of criticizing those moves, ESPN praised the overall vision behind what Miami is building. That immediately raises an important question. What exactly did they see that convinced them this offseason deserved one of the league's highest grades? Because the explanation might surprise you. It wasn't one blockbuster trade. It wasn't one superstar free agent signing. It wasn't even one draft pick. According to the evaluation, everything starts with one player. Malik Willis. The report makes it very clear that belief in Willis is one of the biggest reasons the Dolphins received such a strong offseason grade. In other words, if you believe in Malik Willis, it's much easier to believe in the direction of this franchise. And that's exactly the argument ESPN makes. Before we continue, make sure you've already hit that like button if you're excited to see this new Dolphins era finally take the field. And today I want to hear from the most optimistic Dolphins fans watching. Comment below. Go Dolphins! Trust the process. Let's see how many fans believe this rebuild is moving in the right direction. Now, my personal opinion is simple. Rebuilding an NFL team is never easy. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the right decisions. You have to let talented players go. You have to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term flexibility. And that's exactly what this front office appears to have done. Whether every move works remains to be seen. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. There was a plan behind every major decision. According to the discussion, Miami didn't try to chase headlines this offseason. Instead, the organization accepted that the salary cap situation wasn't where it needed to be. Rather than delaying difficult decisions, the Dolphins chose to reset the roster, move on from expensive veterans, make one major investment in free agency, and continue building through the draft. The report describes that approach as difficult, but the right path for the future. Then comes the move ESPN highlighted above all the others. Signing Malik Willis. According to Seth Walder, bringing Willis to Miami makes perfect sense for a franchise starting over. The report openly acknowledges the risks. Limited starting experience. A small sample size. Questions surrounding his first seasons in Tennessee. None of those concerns were ignored. But despite those red flags, the evaluation argues that Willis's performances in Green Bay showed enough potential to make this a worthwhile gamble. That's a significant endorsement. Because franchise quarterbacks rarely become available through free agency. And according to the report, Willis possesses enough upside to justify taking that chance. What makes the situation even more interesting is that the praise isn't based only on the player. It's also based on the contract. The discussion explains that Miami structured the deal in a way that gives the organization flexibility moving forward. The Dolphins believe in Willis. But they also protected themselves if things don't unfold the way they hope. That balance between confidence and flexibility is one of the biggest reasons this move received so much praise. And honestly, that may be one of the smartest parts of the entire offseason. But ESPN also identified one major concern that could determine whether this rebuild succeeds or struggles. Now let's talk about the one concern ESPN raised. Because even after giving the Dolphins one of the highest offseason grades in football, the report made it clear that Miami is still taking a significant gamble. And that gamble revolves around the players surrounding Malik Willis. According to the evaluation, the Dolphins' receiving core remains one of the biggest question marks on the roster. The report describes the group as being remarkably thin after all the changes that took place this offseason. That's not exactly a shocking observation. After all, one of the biggest moves of the offseason was trading Jaylen Waddle. The report acknowledges that moving Waddle away meant taking away one of Malik Willis's top playmakers. However, it also argues that the return Miami received was simply too valuable to ignore. From ESPN's perspective, this wasn't an easy decision. It was a calculated one. A move designed to strengthen the organization over the long term instead of focusing only on the upcoming season. The discussion even points out that Miami's financial outlook played an important role in this strategy. Rather than locking themselves into expensive commitments, the Dolphins now have significantly more flexibility moving forward. That flexibility creates opportunities. It allows the organization to continue building the roster over the next several years instead of trying to solve every problem immediately. But let's be honest, there's a price that comes with that approach. And it's the one ESPN highlighted. Who exactly is Malik Willis going to throw the football to? Right now, that's still a legitimate question. The report specifically mentions names like Jaylen Tolbert, Malik Washington, and Kevin Coleman Jr., while also noting that Chris Bell is expected to begin the season on the PUP list. Those realities naturally create uncertainty around Miami's passing attack entering training camp. The discussion also expresses optimism about Greg Dulcich, suggesting he could have a strong season. Even so, it recognizes that relying on him as one of the primary receiving options creates understandable concerns. That's why ESPN believes the Dolphins intentionally accepted a lower offensive floor in exchange for creating a stronger long-term foundation. And honestly, that's probably the biggest debate surrounding this entire offseason. Would you rather keep proven veterans and limit your future flexibility? Or would you accept growing pains today if it gives the organization a better chance to build something sustainable tomorrow? According to the report, Miami chose the second option. They accepted that this rebuild would require patience. They accepted that certain position groups might look thinner in the short term. But they also believed those sacrifices would position the franchise much better over the next several seasons. What's interesting is that ESPN didn't criticize the Dolphins for lacking a plan. Quite the opposite. The evaluation repeatedly emphasizes how intentional this rebuild has been. Every difficult decision, every roster move, every financial choice. The report views them as part of a larger strategy rather than isolated transactions. Now comes the moment where all of these ideas begin facing reality. Training camp. Because once players report, nobody will be talking about offseason grades anymore. The conversation shifts to performance. Can Malik Willis justify the confidence placed in him? Can this young group of receivers develop faster than expected? Can the offense prove it's stronger than many people currently believe? Those questions won't be answered by analysts. They'll be answered on the practice field. And if this young offense grows together the way the organization hopes, ESPN's A- grade may eventually look even more accurate than it does today. But if the concerns about the receiving core become a major obstacle, this positive offseason evaluation will quickly be forgotten. And that's why I believe the most important word in this entire discussion is patience. Not because the Dolphins expect fans to simply wait, but because this front office appears to be building something they believe can last. The report repeatedly comes back to the same conclusion. Miami didn't accidentally end up in this position. The organization made difficult decisions on purpose. It accepted short-term uncertainty in exchange for creating long-term flexibility. And according to ESPN, that's one of the biggest reasons this offseason deserved such a high grade. Think about everything that had to happen. The Dolphins moved on from established veterans. They reshaped the roster. They invested in Malik Willis instead of searching for a different solution at quarterback. They built through the draft. And they resisted the temptation to solve every roster weakness with expensive free agent signings. That's not an aggressive